All yours, Kat.
All right. Okay. Thanks. All right. Hi, everyone. This is Kat Alano, and this is Conversations for APF TV. Today, joining me, I have Siddiq Bay, Nabil Abdulrashid, and Lyn May, and we are going to be discussing something that's taken over the entire world, the Black Lives Matter movement. Hi, everybody. How are you today?
All good.
Hi.
Fabulous.
Guys, okay, so I wanted to bring you here today to have a conversation about the Black Lives Matter movement. Obviously, you've been following it online. Have you been following it dedicatedly? Have you been watching on the news and on your Instagrams and your Twitters and all of these things?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so first question. There have been so many instances of violence against Black people in the past. Why do you think this particular one, George Floyd's death, had the impact that it did across the world? Why do you think this was the death that pushed everybody over the edge?
Me personally, I think the visuals had a lot to do with it. So the policeman's knee being on his neck and the length of time that he was on his neck. And if you look at the video, it doesn't seem like it's an accident, whereas maybe some of the others, visually, it could have looked like an accident to some degree. And I think that I think everyone's just had enough, and the visuals have played into that.
Gentlemen, do you have anything to add as to why George Floyd's death was the one that really pushed everybody over the edge?
I was going to say what Lyn said. It's the visuals. Usually we see like panic shootings, you know, like policeman visibly scared and panicking. And this time it wasn't that. It was very cold. And yeah, it just very sinister, you know, the way he was kneeling with that little smirk on his face with no regard for his life, you know, even afterwards when he died, he didn't care.
Bill, do you have anything to add? I'm sorry.
I mean, what they're saying is true, but I disagree. I think it's clearly the Illuminati and 5G and brainwashing which has led to this conspiracy. I mean, the whole time, one guy had his eye covered, so clearly it's a conspiracy to make us all buy the new. I'm joking. What has happened, I think, while my two esteemed guests are correct, and yes, I was being sarcastic, I'm not completely insane.
You sure?
I mean, if it was the Illuminati, I wouldn't be saying it on camera. But what I think also led to this is probably the most obvious thing, so obvious it's silly to mention, but more people are at home. More people are sitting down and looking at their phones. In the past, people who aren't interested in these things or aren't this way inclined would not know. You tell somebody, did you see that video? Like, no, I didn't see it. Or, you know, because people are busy looking at whatever they want to look at. But at this point, this far into quarantine, people have already watched every single TV show that they're going to watch. People have already finished all their box sets, So the world right now, you know, online marketing is booming right now because more people have time to sit down and watch videos. That's why people watch the video to the end. And then, yes, also the nature of the killing. Again, it's easy to shoot someone, right? It only takes a few seconds to do. But to choke somebody in the way that this guy did, and if you look at it from a technical standpoint now as a blood choke, it only takes 8 seconds to choke someone unconscious. And the police officer was trained. He's a former bouncer. He knows about these things. If you watch it again, I mean, I wouldn't advise you to, but when I watched it, I could see clearly, not only was he choking this guy, he would raise his knee just so the guy could be revived, so he could do it all over again. Very sadistic killing. It's different from shooting somebody. So now
I think it's because everyone's bored as well. Not bored, but
yeah, everyone's bored.
Everyone's at home, and there's all this pent-up energy. You know, if you think about our outlets of energy, it's usually in the gym, in clubs. We're active as humans, and all of that has been taken away. So it was literally the catalyst for a release of energy, whether that be emotional or physical.
Yeah.
There you go, 5G. So, you know, you have all of that. You have all of that. It was bound to happen. It was bound. And, you know, also, there's also the fact the police have been doing this and getting away with it for a very long time. Very, very long time. They still haven't even sorted out Flint, Philando Castile, and other murders. And now if that this nature of death has only been caught on camera once with Eric Garner, who was choked that way. But generally, just like here in the UK, most of the deaths in police custody are from asphyxiation, but there's never any footage to prove that it happened. They always make it out to be an accident, like Sandra Bland. But in this particular situation, there's no denying it was clear-cut murder. And the EMT guys didn't even give him CPR. They didn't even handle the body properly. They just tossed him onto the gurney. So from beginning to end, it was a shambles, and the whole world has seen it. So, and everybody's looking for something that they can be angry about because we can't fight Corona. Oh, you know, it just happened at the right time.
Just to add some more to it as well, while I think the outrage is genuine, I do think there's been a media interest for their own agenda. You know, I feel like there's been the perfect opportunity for the left to say, yes, we have now got a cause to rally behind to further whatever agenda they have. So I feel that's one of the reasons why it's gone viral the way it has, because an element of the media is benefiting from it, you know. So
absolutely. And it's the one moment that you know, so many things have happened, like with the failure of governments worldwide, right-wing governments, to provide adequate care during Corona. And you know, the right-wing politicians have been flunking out completely in debates. But there's, you know, the left wing has to be moral. They can't attack right-wing politicians, say, ha ha, see, people are dying and you're not doing this properly. But with this outrage, the left has now found a way to then, like now there's already policies, I don't know if you've seen the tweets, the difference between Labour and Conservative and how they would handle things in the future. Even in America now, they're showing that they're going to defund the police and so on. So Siddiq is right. This is the perfect time for politicians as well to stick their agendas in. It's a perfect time for companies to market stuff simply by saying Black Lives Matter. The cheapest bit of advertisement for Nike was having a black screen.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you if any of you have actually had your own experiences of racism in the past that you would be willing to share with us.
No, joke. I think obviously as a black boy growing up in South London, you get there's a lot of micro aggression, you know, and you know, you don't realize it till I think I first became aware of it in secondary school, because my primary school was predominantly black, so I didn't have no white people in my class. I never had a white person in my class. I was used to being around black people. My secondary school was mixed, about 50-50, and I would remember whenever we would congregate, the black boys, you know, we're loud, we're having fun, we're bantering, and teachers always had a problem with that, you know. It was always, move along, lads, and we're like, but the white boys are not being told to move along. Why are we being told to move along? So I think from age 11 onwards, I started to notice a difference in how us black people are treated, you know, students. On the estate that I grew up on, notorious estate, I don't know if it was racism, but it was an anti-police sentiment around, because I was running from police before I was a criminal. I didn't know I was running from police. I just used to hear, boy them! And then we're just scattering, you know? And I've witnessed like my friends' dads jumping over fences at the head as soon as we hear boy them. And it was, when you're young, it's almost fun, innit? You just feel like it's a game of cat and mouse. We don't know why we're running from police. I ain't got nothing on me, but I'm running. But then as we got older, I started to maybe feel that there's some racial element to it based on what we would hear. Direct racism, the first time I would say it was not covert and it was overt was in prison. When I was in prison and when I got sent out of the London prisons, because the London prisons are totally different to the prisons out. And then it was like, wow, it was a big culture shock, because growing up in London as a black boy, you don't ever feel that you're not the dominant. You feel kind of still dominant, do you know what I mean? Because we're around each other and no one ain't really talking down to us or telling us anything. But out of London, in those prisons, you're seeing white people that are just as bad as you. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're bad. Them Welsh taffies, the Bristol white boys, and they're not scared. So you start seeing things, you start hearing things, you start having to like get knives ready, you get your shank, you have to like organize yourself, like we're gonna be over there, they're gonna be over there. Almost like we're militarizing ourselves to deal with a possible threat from the other side, you know what I mean? So from there, that was the first time I'm seeing it properly. And then over the years, I've seen little things, airports, whatever, but you just get used to it. Yeah.
Lyn May, Nabil, do you guys have anything to add? Do you have any experiences of your own?
I'd say probably in the workplace, if it's predominantly a white workforce, or there would be they would insinuate based on like my hair or food, or I'd say more in line with culturally, but obviously due to me not being a white woman, I had issues with a manager. But with me, I prefer to channel how I deal with it and use the same system that they've created back on them. So whereas maybe a lot of my friends that has experienced racism would go onto social media and, oh, I can't believe this, or I can't believe that, I took necessary procedure. I will take you to court. I will hurt you in your pocket, because that's what the system's there for. And even though it may have been there to affect minority groups, it doesn't state that, so you can use it back on them. So when it comes to things like that, I try to use a bit more logic as opposed to emotion. And I'd say in terms of other experiences of racism, I went to a club a while ago in 2015, and everyone with me was black. All the girls were black, and they were refused entry. And initially they were told us we can't go in, even though I'd been there multiple times. And after some back and forth, they said I can go in by myself, but my friends can't. So to me, that's still an experience that left a bitter taste in my mouth, because why can my friends who are dear to me not gain entry based on they don't look the part, but it was nothing to do with clothing. So I use the system, I use the full force of the law. That was with social media. The whole project, in terms of people jumping on to support it, allowed us to galvanize that and take legal proceedings. But even if it didn't go viral, I still would have taken legal proceedings, because that's what I always want to do. Because I think that the respect issue is that we don't use the system, and they know that, and they're comfortable with us not using the system. So it's even like, oh, they're just marching again, big deal. Like, it's taken how many years for something to be done? So I think, even though I'm not going to say it's our fault, no one is going to help us but ourselves. And I'd say the last point of racism, probably the most that has affected me, is internal racism within my own home. Me being mixed race, a black person may go outside and face racism from people external to their home. However, the most racism starts with me going inside of my home. So whether that be from my Pakistani side criticizing my black side criticizing my white side criticizing my black side, and you have to be this sort of mediator to juggle between all the different races that I have within me. And I think because you don't want to call out your own flesh and blood, it's the hardest to deal with for me.
Right. Nabil, you're grinning. Is there something you wanted to say as well?
I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I'm generally quite a happy guy. And because I'm all for female empowerment, I was just listening to our brilliant sister here narrating her experiences. And I agree. I think that a lot of the time, people are used to us not taking legal procedures and using the system against our oppressor. While I am known for also inciting hysteria and stuff on social media against racism, I also do believe that it's important to understand how to fight systemic racism through the system. A lot of the time, things like understanding the law, working with police, knowing how to discuss things with them in legalese, for example, understanding these are all things that aren't taught to us because we're taught to fear. Now, I grew up in a small country you might have heard of called Nigeria. And I came to England in my teens. So the difference in the role of black people from Nigeria to Britain, it was so clear. I've always been conscious of racism since I was a kid, because my father studied medicine in Russia. And, you know, he told us of his experiences, how they would touch his skin, see if the black came off, right? So growing up, we were always very conscious of our history, our heritage, and who we are, and who our ancestors were. And even from traveling, because my father used to travel a lot when we were younger, and I traveled with him, I would see how we were treated compared to other black people. We had British passports, but we were still treated with so much scrutiny. I remember one experience that shaped me as a man, where we were in Egypt, and my father was walking, and a soldier snatched his passport out of his pocket. And my dad turned around and snatched his passport right back and said, "You're not going to do that to me. You've picked the wrong black man. You're not going to do that to me." And I was about 9 or 10 when I saw this. And that really shaped my worldview. So when I came here to the UK, straight away, I noticed a difference in the way we were treated in college, right? In college and in uni later, I found that what would get laughed at by lecturers from white students would get black students in trouble. Like a white student could kick off and be upset in class and not get disciplinary or any kind of repercussion. Yeah. But a black person just switches his tone. And that still happens to this day. Yeah. To this day in public places. Like someone like me or Siddiq cannot get visibly upset when we're arguing or discussing with a white person, because we're then deemed threatening. And that's the same for black women or even women of color. The darker you are, the less likely people will take you seriously as a victim. So for example, had the sister's friends been attacked by bouncers that night and thrown on the floor? That's brilliant. What breed do you have?
They're just small Shih Tzus.
That makes sense. They tend to be quiet. But yeah, had it been her friends who got attacked by bouncers and brutalized, people will be less likely to help black girls than they will be to help white girls, because black women are seen as less fragile than white. Generally, black children are seen as less childlike than other children of other races. And I saw that in the way security at college dealt with black kids. I saw that consistently. And then, you know, when I was younger, I got stopped and searched a lot long before I ever got involved in any type of crime. And then in prison, even in London, there was a big difference between the way when the screws would have to adjudicate between black and white inmates. There was a huge difference. Like I got done for bullying just for defending myself, you know. And that happened to a lot of the black boys. When we got transferred to HMP Ford, a lot of the white inmates complained when so many black boys started coming into the gym, because at that time Ford was close to Southwest London, so a lot of inmates from Brixton and Croydon sides, Wandsworth guys, were being shipped there to do their open prison sentence, and they were writing complaints that they felt too intimidated to go to the gym. Yeah. So just by existing as a black man, you intimidate people. You don't even have to be violent. You don't have to be aggressive. Okay. And, you know, I had my marks docked at university. I was supposed to graduate with a first. And I had marks docked because I dared to speak out against casual racism I saw from my lecturer towards black students. There were only 2 black students in my year. And at the time, I was married and at uni. And I was traveling an hour and a half to get to uni every day. My classmates were 15 minutes and 10 minutes away from uni. They would come in late and face no punishment, no castigation whatsoever. But I would come in 5 minutes late and have a legitimate excuse because there were trains and things going wrong, and I would get in trouble. So these are small examples. I've had bigger examples too, but these are common ones that anybody can see, even at work. If you're a black person and you have a problem and you complain, you then get signaled out as a troublemaker. You know, you people, when you complain about issues you have, you then get tone policed. So at work, they constantly tell you about how you say what you're saying. Not what you're saying, but how you say it, even though you're not even in the wrong. And that's just, I've worked with other people in corporate environments before I switched to what I'm doing now. And it was the same thing. There was always this air of, how do I put it? When you're black in certain environments, it's very clear that you're not welcome. You're scrutinized more, and you're more heavily punished, even by law enforcement. And I noticed all of that over my time here. Yeah. So I rambled. Would you agree with the statement that because it's being captured online more, because we have phones all the time, that racism has always been this bad? We've just now been able to see it because people are starting to film it and put it online.
Do you feel that that's accurate?
I think it's always been seen. It's whether people cared. I don't think no one could deny that they haven't seen racism or either benefited from it or been a victim of it. The issue is that there's a sudden accountability for it, or an appearance of accountability for it. Majority of people don't care. If I'm being honest.
I think like what you said, I think it's an appearance of accountability.
Yeah.
Because people that are genuinely feel of their own account, like we need to do something. It wouldn't take this to happen for them to release on their corporate website, Black Lives Matter. They would openly come forward and say, do you know what? We've done some research into how we staff our company. We've done some research into ill treatment of our staff prehistorically, and we want to release X, Y, Z. No one actually, out of all the companies that I can think of, have been proactive. It's purely based on reactive measures. So even now, I don't think, but the way I see things is more from, like I said before, a logical point of view. Why would, in terms of how Britain was structured, colonialism, the British Empire, why would they actually do something to change that when they're comfortable benefiting off of that? They wouldn't. I mean, if I put things into layman's terms, and this may seem, you know, a bit far-reaching, but if I have managed to feed my children, clothe myself based on what I've done to someone else, am I then going to take all the clothes off of my back and give it back to them? I'm not, because I don't want to be cold. And it's as simple as that. It's like when you look at the UK as a whole, they don't manufacture, they hardly grow anything, they don't produce, everything is outsourced. So if they were to really take a grip on everything that we benefit, down to how our phones are made, down to the clothes that we manufacture, down to that we import, should I say, we're still participating in slavery and racism now. And we have no issues with doing that. These countries that supposedly are in debt to us, if you think about the price point of a diamond, if you think about the price point of gold, do you think that those African countries or those Asian countries that we're paying the asking price, do we even let them dictate what the asking price is for those raw materials? So I digress. Coming back to what racism is, they still benefit and enjoy the fruits of racism. So all they're doing is, you know, plastering over a scab. They're not resolving the wound. And it's not in their interest to resolve the wound. So how I approach things is, like I said, I will do what I can to know that they can't walk all over me. And that's all it's about.
You know, speaking of not doing anything to heal the wound, I did want to talk about the roots of the wound, because I feel that it's important for generations now that don't understand the history, haven't actually had the history books and actually read it or anything, you know, how racism came to be this awful, you know? And I don't think that people realize that what has happened in history is still affecting us now. And unless we look at the history, we can't correct it. And Nabil, I know that you're a bit of a history buff. Is there anything really poignant that you would want young kids to know nowadays?
I'm deeply humbled by present company, so I will not allow you to call me a history buff. What I will say is that I managed to learn a little bit, and I think it's very important. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And I think, you know, there's so many misconceptions about racism, and one of the most common tropes for years, but it happened a long time ago. Yes, it did, but it's like, you know, if I infect you with AIDS, like 9 years, and then I see them like, hey, calm down, man, I only injected you 9 years ago, what's your problem? The time people don't understand that there's whole banking systems, there's whole systems of usury built off the back of what happened hundreds of years ago. And a lot of the issues that then affect the geopolitics of regions. So for example, why are Yemenis now in a drought? Why are they now in famine? Because their neighbors were given weapons. Why? Because their neighbors were given weapons to kill their neighbors and become rulers and be known as Saudi Arabia. Why is there tribal issues right now in Nigeria? Because someone drew a bunch of lines around us and made tribes that don't know each other, decided they were in the same country. So, you know, people think that, okay, slavery ended and everything is good. But people don't know about things like COINTELPRO. People don't know about things like Capo and all the other issues that have been used, or the SAS participation in the sabotaging of our economies, or how people came to be in the places that they live here in the UK, or how Jamaica almost became became a communist state like Cuba, or was sabotaged. These things all lead to the issues that we have today now. You know, like I think only in 2015 did we stop paying off the families of slave traders for their loss of not having slaves anymore. How can we say that this was a long time ago? Companies like
I do think that I'm not going to say play into it, but because of our desire to want money or instant fortune, we play into, if you want to call it the left, or, you know, the celeb sort of. For example, even today I mentioned on social media, like Will Smith is doing another slave film. Like, why are we still doing hood films and slave films? That plays into racism massively, and it goes back to policing. It goes back to policing. If I'm in Doncaster and I've never met a black man, and all I can see on television is a black man as a slave, a black man as a
gangster,
killer, a criminal, a drug-dealing rapper. When I come and work in London and I see all these black men in the middle of Peckham or Tottenham, I'm not going to automatically think, oh, well, maybe he's a surgeon. I've never seen a black man on TV as a surgeon.
Therein lies the next issue. Therein lies the issue of media.
We need to stop playing into them formulating our PR, because our PR is completely flawed. So I'm not blaming us again. If we see an opportunity, if someone gives me 5 million tomorrow to be this gang-banging drug dealer, why would I say no? But at the same time, this is the damage. We're further perpetuating those same racial stereotypes that we hate and why police stop us, but we're then perpetuating them in entertainment.
If I may, while I agree with that, and I have to always ask, who are the major funders behind these movies? What was the first ever Hollywood movie designed for? Birth of a Nation was the first ever Hollywood movie. Yeah. Birth of a Nation was the first ever Hollywood movie, and it was basically the propaganda of the KKK. Most of the stereotypes we know about black people now came from this movie, right? And around that period, that's where the watermelon thing came from. Everything came from this movie, and it was designed as propaganda. And the problem is we don't have our own effective arm to counteract this. So every now and then they might give us one Black Panther movie, but then there's still hundreds of negative stereotypes and self-fulfilling prophecies in media. And the thing is, even if the majority of us do not like this, do not enjoy this, don't want to participate in this, the black people that participate and have power in Hollywood are a small minority. And even if we don't buy the movies, there's not much we can do. I mean, ideally, we could all come together and make our own Hollywood, right? But the reality is, these companies and institutions are so powerful and so well funded and so well established that even if we decided to rebel against them and set up our own media, like what Tyler Perry's trying to do, we would still need at some point to go to them just to get our movies commissioned and sent around the world.
No, sorry, bro. Continue.
It's an uphill battle, and sometimes I think the only thing we can do is go through other means. Like, for example, I feel that our history should be available to our kids. Whether or not, maybe not in the educational system in here in the UK, because what does it benefit them to teach their own kids the truth about the empire? They're not going to do it. And if they are, they'll teach it very watered down.
But but again, the history, like even with Black History Month, if the small...
Why should it be a month?
No, but even, I'm just saying, for example, Black History Month, for the small amounts of history that may be being taught in schools. Again, it's back to freed as slaves. It stops at slavery.
Can I add to this, yeah? One of the problems, the biggest problems that I see, yeah, because one of the things that you've both kind of mentioned is we can't come together as one homogenous group, yeah? But the thing is, because we're not, but the problem is this label of black, it does us a disservice, because if that's the only identity that we've got, then we can't band together under an identity that doesn't reflect who we are, and it doesn't reflect our history. So I don't blame the fact that, because we don't have long-term thinking as a community, because I'm not trying to prepare a future for Brazilian black children or Cuban black children or Jamaican black children, because we're not this, obviously we've got the same color and we are actually the same people, but it's hard for me to visualize them as my people, even though you've all grouped us together as black, where if you look at the Pakistani or if you look at the Chinese people, they think long term for their individual nations. And you do find that within our little groupings, Nigerians prepare for a future with Nigerians, and the Yorubas do the same and whatever. But to do it under the title black, I think it's not even fair to put that upon us, to say that as black people, we need to come together and have one idealistic future we're going to work towards, because white people don't have that pressure upon them. There's French white people, there's Scottish white people. They're going in different paths. Even with Asians, the Indians and Pakistanis, they're going in different paths.
But I think in the UK,
people,
you have, sorry to interject, in the UK, you
Yeah.
have, to a degree, you have to, because black people are 3% of the give or take 3% of the
Yeah.
population. So if
Yeah.
you then split that, you're going to have these different cultural eruptions, which you know, historically, the generation, our generation and below us, I think they don't have those issues of, you know, African versus Caribbean, which
Yeah,
again can be an issue. So maybe our generation and below us can galvanize and work together as black people.
I would like that. I would like that. I just don't like the fact, I don't like the name black. I would like us to come together under a stronger identity. Nabil knows where I'm going with it, but I feel there's a, we have a strong.
What would you call it?
I think something that I'm not going to say it on there because it's controversial, but I feel like we've got a strong lineage. We've got a strong lineage that gives us power.
92 people.
Yeah, but you know, and I think we have claim to some powerful affirmations, and I think we should start going by it rather than just calling us a colour that doesn't reflect our history, doesn't reflect our ancestors. Our ancestors never called themselves black.
But that brings it back to the point I was making about having to have something in place, facilities in place to educate people about their actual history beyond slavery, beyond slave revolts. Our cultures are so rich that the further back you go, the more amazing they are. But if you ask the average, even woke person, right, unless he's read some books from some guy in New York somewhere that's never even been to the homeland, how much they know about the actual history, it's not there. A lot of people
I think even that, I think, is a distraction. I think it's important to know history to a degree, but if you meet a 25-year-old that works at JP Morgan, he might not even know about the Battle of Hastings. So, like, I think we put too much emphasis
because they're not in a position where
it's going to free us. When I think, let's concentrate, like, again, my experience is slightly different, but I spoke to my family today and I said, what experience have you had of racism? Being that my uncles, they look white, but their surname's Hussein, and then when you get to know them, you can see that they're Asian. So I said, what experience do you have? Like, when people are ignorant and say, oh, you're all right for an Asian person, which they get, they ignore it. I'm like, why don't you pull it up? Because, you know, black people, we always like tend to want to check them. And they said, well, at the end of the day, I make good money. The people who matter love me and respect me. And if anyone crosses the line legally, I deal with it accordingly. But when I came here to this country, when the Asians came here, they concentrated. If they cared so much about racial slurs, which I'm not saying they're okay, but if they cared so much about racial slurs and all these little things, then they wouldn't be nearly taking over large parts of London, taking over High Street.
I have to. The nature of racism that Asians face is different from the nature of racism that Caribbean and African people face. Because if you look historically across the globe, historically across the globe, Asians have been propped as a model minority and a buffer above black people. So therefore, economically, they don't face the same restraints that black people have. We can look in the Caribbean, we can look in Africa, we can look in Asia, and here. They were not given the same things. It wasn't possible for black people to reach the level of financial security that Asians did because our struggles were different and our hindrances were different. There's a reason why, for example,
strong cultural identity as well.
And it's a lot harder for us to integrate. How many levels of marrying into white people do you think it would take for me
But they
and
don't
my
try and
offspring to
integrate,
look
is what
different.
I'm saying. Their point is they're not desperate to integrate, and I understand.
What I'm saying, I'm not
Can
talking
I add,
about,
can I,
I'm
can I
saying,
add something to it?
if you
Can
look
I
at
add
the
something
concept
to it?
of
Yeah.
a model minority, the financial hindrances, economic hindrances may have been there for Asians, but not to the degree that it has been for black
No,
people.
Can
I have to
can I can I
disagree.
can I add to that?
Historically,
There's two different
Can I add
types.
to that? Let me
Yeah.
add to that. Yeah. One thing that also benefits them, yeah, is a strong cultural identity.
Yes.
They have a strong
I
cultural
agree with
identity, so they know who they are, know where they come from, and that's why even with the black community, you see a difference between the
Nigerians and
Africans
others.
and
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
because we know our history. Do you understand? We're taught from young about our history, so it gives us a bit more of a confidence. You know what I mean? To kind of not fall into the white supremacist ideology being being put upon us, where those that come from America or the Caribbean,
They don't have the same privilege
they
that
don't
we
have the
do having
same,
lived
you know
through
what I mean?
another culture.
Obviously, they have a culture, but it's not, they also know that there's been a cut off from their culture. And I don't
Yeah.
know if
But my point is
subconsciously
this though, even
affects
among
them to a degree.
Nigerians, the struggle that we've had cannot be compared to that of South Asian and Middle Eastern immigrants.
Yeah.
This isn't even opinion, this is fact. It's documented. It was harder for us to get into certain environments, even in colonialism. Asians were brought into Africa because they were conquered first. They were brought into Africa as indentured labor, not slaves. They were allowed to accrue capital. They were allowed to accrue financial positions. In South Africa, the best example of white supremacy is South African apartheid. And it was whites first, then Asians or Indians, then coloreds, and then black people. And it's always been leveled and staggered that way. And you'll find traditionally Asians have always acquiesced to white supremacy as long as they could wield power over black people. So the same job that Asians
done what?
Traditionally and historically, Asians have always acquiesced to white supremacy as long as they were able to wield power over black people. Because traditionally in the Indian subcontinent, you have things like, for example, the caste system, where there's a stratification of the lightest and the darkest from the top to the bottom. So they weren't as predisposed to rebelling against white supremacy. So they were conquered quicker, even though it's a bigger landmass. They were then taken across Africa and Asia, other parts of Asia, and used as an artificially created middle class over black people. You can see that in Jamaica, Haiti, Brazil, wherever Asians were taken, they were propped over black people. Also, because they were
I understand that. I do understand
so
that.
you can't compare the progress made.
Historically, fair enough. But you can't say.
But even today, look at government.
Okay,
most of the ethnic minorities
you can't
are South
say
Asian.
you can't say in terms of an Asian boy that's come from a working class Asian background, whose grandparents may have been here in the 50s working minimum wage in factories, when when you have Caribbean people who may have come here, who have studied medicine and so on and so forth. You can't say, oh, just because of a group of people that their experience will always be the same, because it won't.
Again, you're using the not all argument. That's like me saying not all Germans speak German. There are exceptions.
Of course,
but the point is, if white privilege exists, brown privilege is also a thing.
I spoke about Caribbean people, right? You're saying, oh, we don't have, Caribbean people don't necessarily have culture or so on and so forth.
I didn't say that.
No, they got culture.
But in terms of, I see what you mean in terms of slavery. But I feel now that due to the left or due to maybe the Labour Party, whatever, it was good for a certain time. But what they've done is they've made Caribbean people who don't have any affiliation with the Caribbean now almost go under this victim mentality, is what I'm saying. So yes, both groups of people.
Do you have any statistics to prove that?
What, the victim mentality? Anecdotal.
Okay. I only go by things I can prove. What I can prove is that a black person is 76 times less likely to get a job.
Statistics can differ.
And 30% times more likely to get arrested and 3 times more likely to get killed than an Asian person in different positions in society now. That's not what I'm thinking. If I walk out the street and I get into an argument with a white person or an Asian person, it doesn't matter how hard I imagine that I'm a Filipino woman. When police come, my treatment will still be the same treatment I will get.
Okay, so with racism,
we can't
let me ask you a question. With racism, let's say that they're going to put the bare minimum in terms of policies in place, but it's still not going to get to the root of the problem. what would you suggest needs to be done? Because you can provide all the stats, I can provide all of the backstory of whether Asian, Caribbean. The point is, how do we expect a system that has benefited off of,
I never said
let's say, colonialism and
you compared experiences and showed the relative success of a small group of Asians and said that why can't black people do that? And I gave you the reason why. Our experiences were different.
So you're saying, based on the experience, black people can't do that. They can't.
When did I say that?
Because of their experience.
I never actually said can't. That was you. That's the second time now you're saying I said something I didn't say. What I'm saying is,
so
it
in
may
terms
take
of
the
how
second
black
group
people
longer.
move forward, what would you suggest?
Can I speak?
Yes.
Yeah.
What would you suggest? That is a very good question.
Self-determination is important. So there should be initiatives to drive us, for example, to start pooling our finances and build an economic power base and all these sorts of things. But my point is, we can't compare the rate of success among our group or groups, because we're many different people. Even as a Nigerian, I can't really compare my experience to that of a Jamaican. We cannot compare the rate of success among ethnic minorities and say it's strictly down to attitude that, oh, these people react to racism straight away and whatnot, because the types of racism we're experiencing are different. What we can do is just work the best we can within our groups. So like I said, building an economic power base, starting to understand the political process a bit better.
Within what groups?
Within the groups that fall under the umbrella we're discussing now, black, or the other term that Siddiq would rather use.
Because you just said Nigerian experience, and a Nigerian experience
I made
cannot
a very
mirror
clear
a
point there,
Jamaican
but you didn't
experience.
understand it, and I don't care to repeat it. My point is this: we have to do certain things, but you cannot compare our rate of success to that of other ethnic minorities, because the degree of hindrance is not the same for everybody. It will take longer, but it will happen as long as we continue in the direction that we're going.
Mm-hmm. So you'd say that Nigerians have to have, like Africans have to have a different game plan maybe to Caribbean people, because like you said, the experience, they can't compare within the group.
We have some similarities right now, those of us who are second generation with Caribbean people, yes. And in fact, our success relies on each other, because if we only say, for example, Nigerians only, we are separate and we are different. And I will say that Nigerians have some privilege over Caribbean people. I will say that. In some degrees, yes, we do. I feel that to a degree, some things were easier for Nigerian
disadvantages. And disadvantages.
There are some disadvantages as well, absolutely, like our names on job applications and whatnot. But my point is this: a lot of Nigerians who came straight from Nigeria came here with qualifications to get jobs and get work and whatnot. They might not have the same experience that Jamaicans that came in during the 50s and 60s did. So on that level, fine, we can disagree. However, the fate of our kids and wider community is joint, because if racism is worse towards all black people, even a privileged Nigerian doctor at some point may suffer it. So that's why I say on a political level, right, when it comes to building a power base and whatnot, we have to be inclusive, because whether we like it or not, that racism will affect black people specifically, whether you're Nigerian or not. Even though it might be easier for some of us within the group to get certain things like money and jobs in certain sectors. But we have to have self-determination as black people. There has to be some form of self-determination. There has to be some form of cooperation among ourselves. Unfortunately, because to a certain degree, some laws will affect us all. Things like stop and search and frisk and all that kind of stuff will affect our kids regardless, more so than any other group of kids. So if we don't understand political process and we can't beat up politicians that open surgeries legally and try and get them to change things, if we can't have a lobby that wields some kind of power that benefits our kids, things will be different. On an economic level, however, I still go against the point. We cannot compare our success to that of Asians and say it's because of black people's attitude alone. There were factors that stopped that and made it easier for them. I hope that was clear.
Yes, thank you. That was very insightful. I just wanted to ask, going back to the Black Lives Matter movement, I know you have mixed feelings about it, but do you feel like the way that it's progressing now with the march and the protests, do you feel that this is the right way to go about it? Like with the defacing of political, racist statues and, inciting violence, the possibility for these protests to be hijacked with people with a different agenda seems to be very high. And I would love to know your opinions on that as well.
I think that's happened already. When I saw the statues being defaced, I did not recognize my people. I didn't see my people. I didn't see my community. I didn't see the people that I grew up with. I didn't see the people that I go to school with. The only time I saw my people visually represented was last week on the weekend. Last weekend when there was threats from the whole Tommy Robinson group. But prior to that, what I saw was anarchists. I saw kids with purple hair. I saw hippies. I didn't see my people. So so I can't speak about defacing statues because that don't seem like the agenda of my people. I'm not saying my people are dumb, but they don't care about no statues. That's not their priority. They don't care. These kids don't even know who these people, these statues are.
On all sides.
Yeah, they don't know. So who are these people attacking statues, and what's that got to do with me as a black man?
It builds more divide and more resentment.
Yeah, because that's not my concern, and I don't understand why we're now responsible for it, or we're now banded under the umbrella of people that go out there and damage statues. Why are black people the poster child for an anarchist movement?
Unrest.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I think you might want to repeat it because I don't know if she heard it. The full question that you asked, one of us wasn't present when you asked it. So.
Right. I was just saying what your feelings were about the Black Lives Matter movement and how it's been progressing, and you know, how there's been violence and how this could potentially be used by people with another agenda to incite their own things that they would like to get.
I personally don't support Black Lives Matter.
I'll be right back.
As an organisation, I don't support it. I don't understand where the approximate 40 million has gone in donations. I don't know where the million has gone for the London-based movement. I think there's not enough transparency. Me personally, I think that anyone should be able to be who they want, be in terms of in a romantic relationship, sexual relationship, who they want. But I feel like this is now the driving force. The whole trans movement is the driving force of Black Lives Matter, for the simple fact that on their About page, it says they want to dismantle something along the lines of, you know, heterosexual thinking. And I'm all for trans, homosexuals loving who they want, but why would you want to dismantle heterosexual way of thinking or the nuclear home? To me, those are not ideals that I can subscribe to.
I agree with Lyn on that, and it's conflicting because I love the energy. You know, I love the energy of my brothers and sisters out there, feeling like they're part of a cause that's for them. Unfortunately, majority of them don't actually understand what the movement's about and who's behind it and who's funding it, and the fact that there seems to be an agenda, and so it seems like our pain is for someone's gain. And that's, you know what I mean, that's heartbreaking. Back to what Lyn's saying, when you go on the site, a lot of it's to do with LGBT whatever rights. Now, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, what has sexuality got to do with anything? Why is that highlighted? Do you know what I mean? Why don't we talk about black people that are on drugs then? Why don't we talk about people that are disabled? If we're gonna talk about the whole spectrum of black people, the spectrum of black people is not resorted down to our sexuality. That shouldn't even be mentioned. If Black Lives Matter, then all Black Lives Matter. Why does the conversation about sexuality have to be at the forefront? And it's not just in one paragraph, it's all over the page, you know what I mean? In their, about, you know, in their manifesto or whatever. So for me, it's a bit suspicious. It seems like a feminist movement disguised as a black movement. And I believe there's a war on patriarchy, and black feminism is the poster child for that.
I agree.
I agree.
And I think the Black Lives Matter seems to, again, like I was saying, instead of being proactive, it's very reactionary. When a death happens, they just culminate, they just galvanize and come from wherever, and all of a sudden they're at the front of all of these mainstream media outlets. But you know, what's more important, I think, of course people die at the hands of police and it's awful, but is about what happens between those deaths. Where's Black Lives Matter as an organisation to empower us to say, okay, this is the next step. Okay, we're releasing a press release because this is what's happening and this is what's happening. It seems to only be when these incidents occur. So for an organisation that seems to be reactionary, and we all know when you want to structure something and move forward and progress, you cannot just do that off of the back of heightened emotions. And for some reason, these heightened emotions seem to take over, and who can clearly think? Nothing comes out of it. Fair enough, policy is changing, seems to be in America, but I just, I've got too many unanswered questions about Black Lives Matter as an organisation.
Their marketing's amazing, though.
Yeah.
Their marketing and branding, that slogan, Black Lives Matter, is so powerful that it's a shame that that organisation owns it. Do you know what I mean? It's a shame because it's powerful.
But even I want it to come away from Black Lives Matter. It's, do you know what I mean? It's like, again, to me, I'm hell bent on this whole victim. We know that they matter, and I want it to be transferred into something else now.
We need to go back to Black Power.
Now that, well, from my perspective now, I mean, to answer your question initially about the rioting and whatnot, like Siddiq, I didn't see any Black people taking down that statue. That's not my, you know, but I want to play devil's advocate, right? Let's assume that it was Black people taking down those statues. So, before women couldn't vote in this country, and the suffragettes would go out and demonstrate, and their demonstrations were so violent that Edith Garrett founded an organization called Bodyguard, who trained these women in martial arts so they could fight police, and police would often get injured in these exchanges. I'm not saying I support violence in any way, shape, or form, no. But you can't really complain about people breaking the law if the whole point of them protesting is that the law doesn't work for them anyway. Sociologists like Imam Durkheim will tell you that sometimes crime is responsible in changing the law when the law does not work. So I don't agree with the defacing of statues. I don't believe it was our people doing that. And I find it, it's racism in itself, how it's portrayed, that it's us doing it, when there's no footage of large groups of Black youth doing that. But even if it is, I still think, you know, what they're demonstrating about, and the fact that not one single police officer in the UK has been able to, we should care more about that than about statues. And maybe that's just me being an idealist. I think it's very suspicious. Huh?
You said not one police officer.
I think the government should be angry about the fact that their police force has gotten away with hundreds of murders in the UK, and they should be over a bit of spray paint over some statues, because only one statue actually got toppled. Most just had a bit of spray paint. I mean, the people who came to defend the statues were urinating on them themselves. So I just think that was a blatant deflection from the news to try and discredit the organization. I think now, because it didn't turn out to be a bloodbath of sorts, they've now started acting like all of a sudden they're okay with the Black Lives Matter movement because it's good marketing. But I don't think it's fair to try and tarnish the entire movement right now with the actions of some, right? That aside, I don't support the Black Lives Matter organization. I don't think that they do much to benefit, apart from their slogan, which everyone has come under, which is brilliant. For me, it's the finances. I looked at the website and where the money goes, and not one of those places that the money goes to is a Black-owned company or a grassroots group that helps Black people. I think a lot of it was like left-wing political groups in America, liberal political groups, and that's where all that money is going. And I think it's a real shame, because some people who never knew about these issues have gotten up and donated money. And when they find out their money isn't going there, they may never trust any other organization to try and solicit some kind of change. And I think that's sad. Me personally, I was always more of a Malcolm guy than a Martin guy. I like the Huey P. Newton Gun Club in America. They're coming up with good solutions. I like Black Guns Matter in America. Look them up, they're pretty cool as well. There's the New Age Black Panthers. But the problem is groups that actually want to effect change, unfortunately, come up under a lot more scrutiny. I don't want to, look how till today, the Black Panthers have only just had their status as a terrorist group removed. And they weren't responsible for any terrorism, whereas the KKK in America is still functioning, But I still think the principle of groups that want to build something is better than groups that just wait till somebody dies, come out, do all this campaigning, make a bunch of money. And historically, if we look at the civil rights movement, feminist groups would always do this. They would put black people in the forefront, then they would take money, and none of that money would go to the black people they used as the figureheads of these movements. And it was a tactic that I think J. Edgar Hoover, which president, was it President Hoover, founded, and they called it benign neglect. After the riots in Newark, they wanted to know why black people always rioted. Why is it black people so prone to rioting? And they realized it was because politicians would lie about what they wanted to do for black people, and then come after election time, they wouldn't do it. So what they did is they came up with BAME, people of color, and ethnic minority, and these terms. And what they would do, for example, say there's an Italian who gets like a certain amount of funding and whatnot, that comes under BAME in America. So black people can't complain. Like, oh, we gave 50,000 to BAME causes, but still no finances were added. The Korean community would get help. The Italian community would get help. The Irish community would get help. But black people who went under this banner of BAME would hear that and be appeased somehow because they heard that money got pumped into BAME, not realizing none of it helps black people. You know, and that's in America. And even to this day, last week, Wednesday, an MP was being quizzed about what the Conservative Party has done to help with black jobs. And he said, oh, well, we've had Asian minority, and then she's like, yeah, they're Indian. That person is Pakistani. What have you done for black people specifically? And he got tongue-tied. It's a trick they've been using for a long time.
Cabinet? In jobs or in cabinet?
I think it was in cabinet. I wasn't
cabinet.
I only picked my interest only peaked when I heard her say, I said black, not black, Asian, minority, ethnic. And I was like, oh, wow, they've got on here. But it's a trick. You know, same thing with Black Lives Matter. These things are, you know, in principle, like everybody uniting to do something is good. But these organizations are very wishy-washy, very wishy-washy.
Okay. On the back of that, you know, with the political agenda aside, the Black Lives Matter movement has opened a door around the world to have discussions about racism. So I want to know your advice. What do you think we should put in place? What do you think that needs to happen moving forward to make sure we don't slip backwards and just carry on as before, and now we're actually more progressive moving forward? What would your suggestions be? BL, I know you have a lot of things.
Is that for black people, or is that for people in general?
For people in general, you know, for everybody to be better about being racist and preventing it, and having conversations that matter.
I'm a realist, yeah. I don't care if someone's racist or not. Just leave me alone. Like I don't want to force people not to be racist. But what I don't want is your racism to affect my quality of life. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, you can be racist. I don't need you to love me. I don't even want you to love me. But how can we affect the system to the point where someone's prejudiceness or their bigoted views doesn't affect someone else's quality of life? I don't know if the world can actually achieve that. I think that's a pipe dream. I just feel black people, I don't have all the answers, but I feel like we just need to find a way to create power, because power creates respect. They don't have to like you. They don't like the Chinese. They don't like the Russians. They don't like the Arabs. However, they're forced to deal with them on better playing terms than they deal with us, because these people have a certain level of power, whether it's economic or military or whatever. And that's what I feel should be the priority for our people. Let's get back some sort of power so that we can sit on the table. We're not on the side with our hands out, begging them to love us, begging them to leave us alone. We're on the table as equals, as people to be fed and respected. That's what I want. However we get there, I'm not the one with the answers. I'm sure there's brighter minds than me that can figure that plan out. But that's what I want to see. I want to see power. I want to see black power.
Bill, Lyn, do you have anything to add?
Probably just to echo that, but I do think we need to take, in the black community, we need to take some level of responsibility to obtain that power. I think we need to admonish younger generations, our own children, and say, you know, like, I think there's this misconception that certain positions cannot be fruitful financially. And you're saying, Siddiq saying, like, okay, power, but what does power look like? In terms of like maybe the Jewish community, again, I can't compare, but when I look at them, it's like they have an aim. They have an aim. So in terms of young people, it's important to make things attractive that have not been attractive, whether that's politics, finance, law. Is those things that we need to be driving for. So in the Caribbean community, I know, again, the African community is not like this in the Caribbean community, but as soon as a young person, I want to be a footballer, but how many percentage of successful footballers come from a big pool of Caribbean boys that are trying to be a footballer? And then even when you have a Premier League footballer, they don't really have power. Marcus Rashford is probably the first I've ever seen that's influenced policy. The first out of how many years of footballers earning millions a year. So what is the point?
Down to timing.
Thank you. It's down to timing. It's down to, we're not going to have another moment of like this in the next couple of years every time for Marcus Rashford to benefit from this time, like you said. So we have to impassion or empower people to enter those industries that maybe seem maybe boring and make it entertaining. Like even down to Boris Johnson, fair enough, he's a white middle-aged man, but from as early as in his early years, he said, I want to either be king or prime minister. Are we having those conversations with our young people? Like, you could actually be a politician. It's very easy. It's very easy to be a politician. When I go to my political meetings, they're not the brightest. The councillors are not the brightest.
Lyn, can I quickly add to that? Yeah, sorry, Nabil. One of the things that other cultures have, is this collective mindset.
Nabil doesn't like you to compare, so we can't compare.
But no, but I will.
You know what? I'm starting to get the impression you don't like me very much.
It will go.
Don't be so sensitive.
It will go back to the collective.
You're contributing to toxic masculinity. As a black man, I should be encouraged to be sensitive.
Back to what I said. You see, when I said about collective identity and a cultural identity, the Jews have it. So a Jew will work for the betterment of future generations, the same as the Chinese. You know, they felt that there's a greater cause than themselves, and I feel like that's one of the things that we need to do the tough jobs and know that this is going to benefit my community and my children or whatnot, and that's what we don't have, and that's why I said
we need to move in different industries. It's so important to realise that there's so much money to be made in you know, industries that you wouldn't even think of. Like one of my friends, he's got 3 businesses now and 2 properties, buying his 3rd. And when everyone literally in South London was like thinking of doing something maybe illegitimate, all his groups of friends, he looked at, okay, what can I do? And then he spoke to a few people, and literally with his van, when he turned 18, he bought a van and he drove around and he dismantled baths and took all of the metals off of that and sold it. And sometimes he would make a week about £600. Now, if you speak to a young person, maybe going down the wrong path, again, no fault of his own due to struggling to get a job or what have you, due to racial issues or poverty, if they take on board maybe drug dealing, when you break down drug dealing, you don't make as much money as it's made out. You have to look at profit. Are you getting paid holidays? Are you getting paid sick pay? Are you having to pick up the phone all the time? So you're not even making the money that is glamorized into what you're thinking of. You're better off being, you know, an electrician or a roofer. But then if you tell a young person now, why don't you be a roofer? It's like a roofer's not cool, but you'll make a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we need to make certain industries seem cool again that are currently not cool, and certain industries that we've overly glamorized, try to dumb them down to a degree because they don't make as much as everyone thinks that they make.
I completely agree. She's absolutely right. And I want to say as well, someone that has to do like a lot of media type stuff, even within media, so many people want to do media, right? But like now, like I attended a pitch for a TV show, right? And they brought on board other writers. Not one was black. Not one. Our stories that are on the media, very, very seldom are written by people that look and sound like us. In fact, even you know, you look at the camera crew, the makeup crew, never look like us. And I find that, you know, if we, you're right, people have to understand that not everybody has to be a big star. We see the glamour, but the richest people in Hollywood, right? When you go to film school, most of the people you see there, Ryan Coogler has shown us that you can be a black man in film, for example, behind the camera, not in front, and still be a star. But like, we don't, the problem is this, right? I feel that a lot of us whose parents came here as economic migrants or whatever, there is that drive to succeed and be seen as successful. Because when you don't come from money, when you don't come from privilege, you have the cause of nouveau riche, right? You have money, you need to show it. The richest people I know who aren't black don't wear expensive things. They don't. You look at Jay-Z now, he doesn't wear expensive, the people he's around have put him onto that, right? Whereas in our community, we want everybody to see that we've made money before we've even made it. And the most visible place is in front of the camera, is on stage. And you're right about politics too. You know, on a grassroots level, we need to be more active. I think as well, we have to realize that we already have a lot of power as black people. You know, we cough and the whole world catches the flu, and that's before Corona. You go on Black Twitter. Black Twitter is the most powerful marketing tool in the history of time.
Are we using it as a positive though?
No, we're not, and that is a shame. Like, someone asked me, if you wanted a superpower, what would you have? I said, I'd want the ability to control Black Twitter. That is the most you, because whenever new companies want to try a new product and make it sell out quicker, what do? They make it appealing to black people. We're a spending force worth billions or almost $1 trillion, right? And we spend it.
Our coal side is powerful. Our
I'm
coal
telling
side
you,
is so powerful.
And like Netflix right now,
like you said, we don't have, if I was to speak to like a group of black people, I said, you know, group economics is like the key. But then even me, like I go to this shop and it's black owned, and I could go to a different shop and get the same items for a lot cheaper. But then it's having the consciousness to know, okay, the other place that can have a lower price point has probably had decades of deals going on with supply chains. We don't have those supply chains. We don't have, but even me, I didn't. When I was younger, I was like, why are you pricing your items so high? Why should I pay for it? But now I have the conscience to say, well, okay, extra 70p, I don't mind, because that's building up someone to be able to then build up their supply chain. Look
at the hot water Anthony Joshua just got in now for saying buy black. In fact, I'll have you know, okay, Kat, that, I mean, my fault because I forgot, because, you know, when you get to my age, your memory goes bad. I was actually going to an African supermarket to buy some stuff before I was planning my day around that, but then I remember that I had this call, you know. But, like, it's very important that we go to our shops. Like, when I go to my butchers, anything that I can buy from an African shop or Caribbean-owned shop, I do. It may be a small thing, but I think this is how we start. It's the principle behind it. Buying black, supporting black.
There's nothing wrong with that as well. If white people are going to go and catch a case for toppling over statues, they can go and buy black for the next 2 weeks, solid. I'd rather white people go and get all their groceries from black shops for the next month than trying to smash down a statue. Smashing down a statue is not going to put any money in my pocket. However, if you're supporting my business or my fellow brother or sister or family member, I'd rather that. And to have that consciousness to say, do you know what, even though the price point is a bit higher, I'm going to assist that, because all of these videos from white celebs, I'm crying and, you know, I'll take a knee. You with your dusty knee on the floor is not helping us. I don't care if white people kneel or not. What's that going to do for us? Nothing.
Come on, it ended racism. Nobody's racist anymore.
Oh, from this morning.
Yeah, it's gone.
Sorry, I didn't know racism was ended since the knee is on the floor.
This one time, right, I condemned ISIS on Twitter. Boom, gone. It works, guys. No, but in all seriousness, it's very important. And I think people are starting to wake up now and understand. Black people are the most influential people on the planet. When it comes to trends, marketing, whatnot, we are. And that is down to the complexity of our situation, I know, and I know we're not all black and so on. But as long as the concept of white supremacy exists, blackness exists. It's so powerful that if racism ended tomorrow, they wouldn't be black. The one thing every black person has in common is that all the non-black people that were around, no matter whether it's Pakistan, Malaysia, wherever, non-black people treat us badly. That's the one thing we have in common that unites us. That's why our identity has become what it is now. So while we're this big network of people, who may not necessarily all be in the same situation, speak the same language. There is a huge, huge variety of skills, resources, and finances available once we start thinking in group economics terms. I know like a bunch of people now, they get like 7 or 8 people together to buy properties. They invest, they buy more properties, but none of them could afford to do it on their own. So now what they do is a group of Gambian brothers, they get together and they do it. I know other people that have other little schemes that they do. They put their money together and they invest, and they're making money from it. And right now, it may seem like humble beginnings, but most of the millionaires we know who weren't born into money started off with something similar, right? Especially those who are embedded in their community. So I really believe a sense of community is key, absolutely key. And that only comes with education with our kids from a young age. So what are you saying? You buying tickets to my tour? What? Support black business and that.
Of course.
Siddiq, Lyn, Nabil, thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast. It's been so amazing to talk to you all and hear your opinions. I feel that everybody who's listening at home will definitely have learned something today. If there's anything you would like to plug, any of your social media, perhaps Nabil, a tour or something you would like to tell us about?
Ladies first, ladies first.
No, I have nothing to plug.
I was going to invest, man. Help me.
There's nothing to invest in.
Help me, help you. Okay, well, if you listen to this for a duration and you didn't find me completely annoying and obnoxious, I apologize if I was genuinely.
No, your opinion matters. Never apologize for your opinion.
Well, in my opinion, I should apologize because normally I'm very reasonable. So you have to accept it because that's my opinion. But if anybody listened to this and enjoyed it at any point, I've got a podcast called I Am Not Your Bilal. Episode 3 drops tonight. Please listen to it. We discuss anti-blackness and history behind it. And also, September, I've been told that the semi-finals of Britain's Got Talent will be coming in. So watch and vote for me because if you don't, you're racist.
Fantastic. And we wish you good luck with that. Nabil, Siddiq, anything you would like to add before we go?
No, I'm good.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been Kat Alano for Conversations on APF TV. Hope you guys have a really good day. Thank you so much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.